Hello and welcome everybody to Groundworks Live. My name is Tim Tracy. I'm the National Sales Trainer with Groundworks. I've been in the building/construction industry since the late 90s when I joined a small property management company. Groundworks, we're the nation's leading foundation repair company. If you weren't familiar with who we are. Today, our topic of conversation is 10 ways to prevent spring flood damage. As they say, sweet April showers do spring May flowers. That was from a poem that was written back in 1610, believe it or not. So a little bit of history with our topic today. But I'm going to go through some of the information that our team has prepared for today. And like always, make sure you put any questions that you have in the chat, and then I'll address and answer any questions to my best of my ability at the end of the segment. So to start us off, let's look first at some common signs of basement moisture issues, also crawl space issues that you may have in your home. And then we'll get into 10 prevention tips that you can take. So as you can see, the most obvious of signs, the top left, is that pooling water. If you've got standing water in your basement or your crawl space, obviously that's a moisture issue that you need to address. The floors and the walls can appear or feel damp. You may notice some peeling, paint, or problems there as well. When you're looking at the foundation crack in that third picture, any kind of holes or foundation cracks are easy entry for water and some of that hot, humid air during the summertime or cold air during the wintertime. The efflorescence, you may have not seen this before, but this is a white chalky substance that'll appear on a foundation wall, whether it be a CMU like the one that's pictured there, or also just a poured concrete wall. But that's water wicking across the foundation wall, and it's leaving behind the mineral deposits that are left there. So that's what efflorescence is. Next, you'll see condensation. When cool surfaces meet warm, humid air, that's when you'll see condensation around, very similar to a cold glass of water during the summer that's sitting on your countertop. Musty odors. A lot of times as homeowners, we don't necessarily notice some of the odors that are in our house, but a friend will come over and they'll wrinkle their nose and they'll say, "Hey, I smell something." You might be dealing with some musty, damp odors, which are normally coming from that number 7 one, the mold and the mildew there. Once those things start growing, it'll drive odors in the home. And then this may not just be from bulk water, but the humidity that's in the air is also leading to a lot of these other problems. So if you notice any of these signs of moisture in your home, whether it's a crawl space or a basement, it's extremely important to learn about how to prevent this spring flooding, because this is just going to compound the problems that you already have present. So let's dive into the 10 ways that you can help prevent spring flood damage to your home. Number 1 is grading. The difference between positive and negative grading is probably easiest to understand, that if water is flowing back towards your house, that's what I would consider negative grading, right? Pun intended. If it's moving away from or shedding from your house, then you've got what's called positive grading. You want that water to move away from the house. This eliminates the possibility of not maintaining your structural integrity. When people are planning around the house and they dig up a big hole, they'll fill in the same dirt. You'll notice a depression there as well. Those are things that happen and people don't even realize. Also during the wintertime, you'll have some shifting in the soils. So check that in the spring. Go ahead and just do a quick walk around the house and make sure that you're good and protected, that you've got a nice slope going away from the house. After you address any negative grading around the home, you should go indoors and start to examine the foundation walls, which brings us to tip number 2, sealing up any cracks and gaps that you may have in the foundation. Now, water is always going to take the path of least resistance. So any holes or cracks in the foundation wall will welcome that water seepage or any air flow from the outside as well, which can bring in humidity during the summertime. So I want to seal up those after you've consulted with a professional foundation inspector. So have somebody come out and look and make sure this small crack isn't something that's going to be a bigger problem, or you're not dealing with some structural issues. Now, sealing these up after you've had it inspected and determined that it's nothing structural, is also going to help increase your home's energy efficiency. So not just keeping out the water, but also keeping out humidity and the problems that can come in with the hot, humid air. So if you seal up those cracks and you determine that that foundation damage isn't an issue, you want to make sure that you look at your home's gutters. So that takes us to number 3, which is gutters. Even if you cleared your gutters of all the leaves in the fall, you want to make sure that you go ahead and check in the spring. You never know what leaves have been blown back up onto the rooftop over the wintertime or from the neighbor's trees. Not all trees shed their leaves at the same time. So something to take a look at. Also, when you're examining your gutters, any cracks or leaks that you're seeing, when that water drips down straight from the gutters, it'll start to erode or carry some of that soil away. And that can lead to some of those negative grading issues that we were talking before. So make sure that you take a good look at the gutters. It's not only going to extend the lifespan and the operational use of your gutters, but it's also going to prevent any kind of standing water, that encourages mosquitoes and the like that you want to keep away from your home during the summertime. So after you've exhausted all your DIY abilities with the first 3 tips, you may want to research sump pump options. Now, you guessed it, number 4 rather, is sump pumps. You want to make sure that you invest in a quality sump pump system when you get this installed in your house. What does a sump pump do, you may be asking? So we dig a hole or set in a crock or a basin or a sump pit, depending on what part of the country you're from. You may use different terminology here, but water collects around the sump basin. And once the water really reaches a certain point inside the sump basin, it's going to trigger the sump switch, which is going to then pump the water up and out of your basement or your crawl space once that motor turns on. So that's the kind of the basics of how sump pumps work, very broad. Now, this doesn't only work for exterior water problems. If you were to have a pipe burst or something like that we talked about last month, then having a sump pump, if you look at the picture over to the top left, there's a floor drain there. So having a good quality sump lid is also going to help there. If you had a pipe burst, I think a 1/2 inch of pipe at 50 PSI can dump 500 gallons of water per hour into your basement or your crawl space. So making sure that you take care of that as well, that's going to help out. Now, these pumps themselves are pumps, depending on which one that you go with, you could get 3,200 to 3,800 gallons of water out an hour at a 10-foot head. So 10 foot from where the pump sits over the foundation wall getting out of the house. So it's a relatively cheap investment to prevent any kind of flood damage or water damage in the basement, which is very expensive when you factor in the cost of what that looks like. So as a company, I just want to point out one thing with a sump pump. You see the 2 pipes coming out of this sump pump lid. As an engineering company, we look at redundancy, not just mechanical redundancy here where we have 2 pumps. If one were to reach the end of its service life, then the other one's going to kick in and take over for that and give you an alarm so that you know that that other one has quit working. So they'll be able to take over for you and make sure you stay dry down in the basement. Now, along with that mechanical redundancy, we'll go to number 5, which is a battery backup system. Now, when does the power generally go out? When it's raining, when you got storms, when you got lightning, those types of things. So you want to make sure if the power does go out in the house that you have a battery backup system that's going to take over and kick in when that power goes. Or if the kid or the dog or somebody were to trip one of the cords that plug into the sump pump, this will also give you that extra protection until you discover the problem. Now, that not only is this an extra layer of protection, but these pumps can pump nearly as much water as your standard sump pump. So you can trust that it's going to be able to carry the load. So before we move on to the next one, I just want to make sure that I give you a quick reminder. Leave any questions you have. We can address anything that you have particular that you're thinking about today as we're going through these tips, and we'll address those at the end of the segment. So after a sump pump, the next level of protection would be to invest in a drainage system. Now, interior drainage system is going to be the one that's going to work best, and we can guarantee it for the life of a structure that it's going to continue to keep the basement dry. We know because of the clay bowl effect, we talked about a little bit about this last month, that water is collecting around the home of the foundation of the home. So outside of that foundation, and as that water collects, it's trying to enter into the home, into the finished space or the interior of the home. So what the drainage system does is that's going to capture that water before it enters into your finished space, channel it to the sump pump so the sump pump can discharge the water and get it out of the way. So generally homeowners can expect a return on investment about 30% when they're looking at a basement waterproofing, something very similar when you're looking at crawl space interior drainage systems as well. So ours has a clog-free design. It's quick and fairly non-invasive for us to install this. And it's going to protect your home and give you that extra layer of protection beyond what just a sump pump alone will do by itself. So brings us to number 7, remove the snow. So if you're one of our people that are living in more northern climates where you're still getting some of those spring snows when those spring rains are also coming, you're at a compounded risk for flooding that'll happen. If you got about 12 inches, 12, 13 inches of snow, I think it is, equals about an inch of rain. So if you imagine this is gathered around your house or up on the roof, and then one of those spring rain comes, it's going to only magnify 1 inch of rain is all of a sudden going to be like 2 inches of rain in a very short period of time. So you want to make sure that you're removing snow. The general rule is 4 to 6 feet from the foundation wall. And then that's going to bring you outside or to the outer edges of that clay bowl effect. So you're not driving a bunch of water back down towards the foundation or down towards the footer where that water will start to seep in. Now, heavy snow can bring as much as 5,000 gallons. So you kind of got that 1,700 gallons of water from a 2,800 or 2,800 square foot rooftop. If it's heavy, wet snow that's come in the spring, and then you get that followed up with the rain, you've got a ton of water that's going to be flowing down towards the foundation, which with all that water down there in the soil, that can not only shift the soil, but it can also refreeze if you've got those cold nights. And then you're looking at the pressure as that ice increases, pushing up against the foundation wall. So definitely something to take a look at in these, if you got snow and you're expecting some rain on top of it. Now, if you're more in the areas where you're talking about flooding being a possibility, you'll want to take a look at number 8, which is our flood vents. It may seem counterproductive to some of us when we're thinking about installing flood vents into the home, because we're thinking about, is this going to allow water in? But you have to consider the impact of hydrostatic pressure. Hydrostatic pressure, basically water has weight to it. A gallon of water weighs about 8 pounds. And then as you stack water on top of one another, that pressure is also increasing extra pressure at the bottom part of that water column. So as that water comes into the foundation, as it comes into a crawl space and it doesn't have a way to get out, that's what a flood vent will do, is allow that water to exit the home before it damages your foundation, before it'll build up. So depending where you're at, if you're in a floodplain, flood vents may be required. You might have them already installed. If you're next to a floodplain or you've had your house redistrict like mine, then you have the option of not having flood vents in there, but it may give you a discount on your insurance. So something to check in with your insurance policy carrier there, and just something smart to have if you're worried about that happening, because the risk of a collapsing foundation walls from that water pressure is definitely outweighs the small investment to go ahead and with the flood vents. So number 9, now, while Groundworks, we're not roofing experts by any means, I did a little research when we were talking about roofs being another area of water coming in, and I run across this idea of ice dams. Ice dam can form around the gutters. Basically, you have melting water, and as it refreezes around the gutters, it can create a buildup. And then as the other snow starts to melt the next day, it will pool next to those ice dams. And if you have any kind of imperfections in the roof or an aging roof, can start to allow water in that way as well. Interesting fix I did see on the internet. If you take a pair of pantyhose, you put the chloride or the ice melt, put that in the pantyhose, throw it up on the roof, and that's supposed to melt down those ice dams. So I thought it was a pretty cool thing to do. But checking on your roof in the spring, once you get an opportunity, make sure that it doesn't need any repairs as summer storms and summer rains coming. Annual roof inspections definitely help out there. Which brings us to number 10. contacting a professional. So if you're noticing any of the first 10 signs that we talked about with the water problems or musty odors or any kind of dampness, any cracks or anything like that, make sure that you're contacting a professional and having them come out and give you a professional's opinion about what's exactly going on with the house. Don't try to wait for a problem to go away, because when it comes to water problems, they only get worse, and it only gets more and more expensive to take care of those problems, because you're also fixing the damage that water's been causing over the years. So better to get out in front of it. When in doubt, consult a professional and get some good advice about exactly what's happening with your particular home and what are the good options that are going to be for you to fix that problem. So that's our 10 tips to help prevent flood damage. Looks like we have a couple of questions here, and let me just scroll down here. So first question: last fall I installed my own sump pump, but I'm worried it's not working properly. What do you recommend for testing to see if it's functioning correctly? Well, the first thing would be make sure that you're getting power to the sump pump. So if it's tripped a breaker or something like that, you make sure that you address where the cord plugs into the wall, and then the breaker and your breaker panel or your control panel. The next thing would be to do a simple flood test. Take a bucket of water, pour it down into the crock pit or basin, again, depending on what part of the country you're from, and get enough water in there where it will trigger that float switch, which will turn on the sump pump and discharge water. So you want to make sure that that completely gets the water out, and that'd be the simplest way of flood testing for a new sump pump, or maybe a sump pump that you're a little bit worried about. And of course, you can always have a professional come out and look and see the age of the sump pump, check out what the manufacturer is, make sure that you bought a nice quality sump pump that's going to be able to protect your home. Now, next one. What are your thoughts on DIY waterproofing foundation paint? It's funny, I get this question a lot, because you see those late night infomercials where the guy takes a boat, puts a hole in the bottom and paints a screen, and then floats that boat around the lake. It's not something exactly I would be excited about doing to protect my home. It's kind of a fun experiment, and it makes for a great commercial. But I can tell you from the hundreds of inspections that I've done of homeowners' basements and crawl spaces, and you see some black paint or some white paint or anything that they've tried to DIY on there, and it hasn't worked. That's why they have me out to do an inspection. So can't say that it 100% wouldn't work, but I'm 99% sure it's not a very good solution. Sounds easy, but I can tell you there wouldn't be companies in the basement waterproofing business if all you had to do was paint it. Because really, if you think about it, nobody paints, the house painters don't work when it's raining outside, right? And you're going to have wet foundation walls if you're having water problems. So how is that paint ever going to seal to the concrete or to the CMU walls? So not something I would trust my house with. Now, here's another question. I have a growing family, would like to finish my basement to add extra living space, but I'm nervous that after I invest into finishing the basement, it could be damaged by heavy rainstorms this spring and summer. What steps would you recommend prior to finishing the space? Well, pretty simple is, looking and trying to identify any of those 10 things that we talked about were possible indications of moisture issue in your basement. That'd be the first thing. If you even suspect that any of those are there, or that you possibly could have a problem, you want to make sure that you call a trusted professional. Get out one of our certified field inspectors to come and look at the space, so we make sure that you don't have any problems going on. Now, once they've determined that you don't have any problems, or they've recommended some possible interventions to help out with your basement or your crawl space, then you can, once they've given you recommendations, and then you've got a fully protected basement, then you can invest that money to go ahead and finish the space, and know that that investment isn't going to have to be redone in 3 to 5 years when you discover those water issues. Let's see, do we have any, what else we got? Crawl space question. So I haven't noticed any standing water in my crawl space, but there is a strong musty odor in my home above the crawl space. what could be causing the odor and how do I fix it? We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, right? A lot of homeowners aren't even noticing musty odors because we just get used to it. Our nose adapts to the smell. But if you're noticing something in the first floor or even the second floor of a house, because of the stack effect, we talked about a little bit about this last month, with a stack effect, warm air is rising through the home. So it's pulling in replacement air through the crawl space vents up into the home. So 50% of the air that you're breathing in your primary living space, your first floor over a crawl space, is coming from the crawl space. So if you're noticing a musty odors in there, as long as you've done the laundry recently, then you're probably talking about the crawl space causing those odors. So check for any towels or piles of towels the kids might have left out. But other than that, it's probably definitely coming from the crawl space. Let me see if we have any other questions here. Switch over to the other one. Yeah, not seeing any others rolling in on the other channel. So like always, appreciate you guys for coming in and tuning in to Groundworks Live. We'll be back next month, month of April, for a new topic. If you have any questions about today's topic, go ahead and go to groundworks.com and we can help address any issues you may have there. Appreciate it. You guys have a good day.